If I believe there's a reason for this pain I'm going through, if I believe that leaving me was all that you could do, if I believe that I can feel you by my side, I'll make it through the night. If I believe that time will teach me how to find my way, if I believe that broken hearts grow stronger every day, if I believe that now you're dancing across the sky, I just might get by. You help me through somehow, get me through somehow. If I believe that in my dreams I'll always feel your touch, if I believe that memories won't always hurt this much, if I believe that I will see your face again, I can wait till then. Yeah. If I believe I'll hold you in my arms again, I can wait. I know.
Good evening, Somerville. My name is Joanne Bacca-Ravicchio, and it's actually Media Week, Somerville Media Week, and I wanted to talk about that in the beginning because it's a great program that we have in this city, and usually, you know, we get money from the franchise to run the program, and now they need help from the community. So if by chance you're able to give a few dollars, go under www.somervillemedia.org, and there will be a donation button there. Please do the best that you can to help this program. It's very, very, it's good. It's amazing. First of all, they have a lot of youth programs here, and there's a lot of classes that you can come in and learn how to use the cameras, go in and use the computers in the other room, and they can teach you how to do your own show, like I did. At first, when I came here, it was amazing. It was back in 2015. I remember entering here, I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I went up to Erica Jones, and I says, you know, I really would like to start a show. And I really don't know how to really go about doing it, but I want to educate people about addiction. You know, after losing my Frankie in 2009, I tried to see where I could help somehow with addiction, because it helped me heal to be able to work with people. If I could save one life, that's well worth it. So I went from 2 shows a month to a show every Monday, and now here it is 4 years later, and I'm still doing it. I've had many people on the show, including judges, state representatives, Jimmy Tingle, that was running for Secretary of State. It was nice to interview all these people because addiction did actually touch their lives. And I was very interested in having you here. This is Marianne Wallace, by the way.
Hi.
Wallace, I'm sorry, Marianne Wallace. And she's a social worker. And we talked very briefly at times about addiction. And I thought it would be very interesting for you to talk about your profession, how you decided to get into that line of work, if you've been affected by addiction. You're a lifelong resident here.
I am.
Why don't you give some people some information on your background?
So I was born and raised here. My father was born and raised here, and my mother immigrated here. I love Somerville. I wouldn't trade it for any other community in the world. When it comes to addiction, I think that there are times when we've definitely been in the forefront, and there's times that we've been a little slower than other communities to react or be open about addiction. I know being a social worker, I think social worker chose me, not necessarily I chose social worker, because I always loved helping people and fighting for people that can't fight for themselves. And addiction has really touched me both personally and professionally, and just really trying to be an advocate and a caring person for people along the way. As a social worker, we continuously see drug addiction as a huge problem. I was saying before the show that, statistics have said that overdoses are down. And a social worker said to me, "Are you sure they're down? Because I feel like we're dealing with a couple every day." So sometimes I wonder, are we talking about deaths are down? Because it certainly seems like the overdoses are very frequent these days, especially with fentanyl in the community. I've had the blessings of seeing people actually get sober and really be proud of themselves and in the fight that they've had every day for themselves, for their children. It's a huge accomplishment when someone can say, "I've been sober for a week, I've been sober for a month," or when they come back and they're like, 5 years I've been sober. It's such a huge accomplishment.
Absolutely. It is. It's like one day at a time. It's not just alcohol, it's everything.
Right.
And do you find, being a social worker, have you been up against where you've seen a lot of children that have had to be weaned themselves when they're born
I have.
addicted?
Substance-exposed newborns are definitely on the rise. And years ago, the program first started out of Melrose Wakefield Hospital. And Representative Clark was a huge supporter of this program, where it brought all different community members together. The NEST program that works with mothers who are addicted, health professionals, social workers, really being a community resource together. We held meetings at night, and most of us all went just on our own time to just be part of this group and really learn about the side effects of methadone or Suboxone and babies weaning off, all the symptoms of babies weaning off. And it's the saddest thing to see a baby go through that weaning process, and it's very heartbreaking for their mothers to watch them go through that. It's not something that they would ever want.
There's been a lot of babies born to parents that have taken Suboxone.
Yes, the Suboxone will also cause some withdrawal from babies. Not as much as maybe methadone or heroin, but it definitely does cause some withdrawal.
Do you think that methadone using it for a long length of time does a lot of damage to the body?
I think, well, during pregnancy, so what I learned a long time ago is that you double the dose of methadone while you're pregnant, just because it takes more to keep a mother symptom-free from withdrawal. It takes a lot more. You need a higher dose of methadone. So after the baby's born, the mother has to go through a weaning process of her own to reduce the amount of methadone she's taking.
Wow.
So for people that aren't used to that, it's a very, they may appear high or over-medicated, and it's not intentional. It's because they've been given so much.
While they were pregnant.
While they were pregnant, now they have to go through a weaning process to go back to
So they
a
both
lower.
go on a weaning process?
Yes.
The mother and the child?
Yes.
Wow. That must be quite the journey.
It is, and I think that, unfortunately, most people that don't have that knowledge don't realize that that mother is actually following her treatment protocol. And I think that we need to do better at educating people that this is not, they're not using, they're not over-medicated, it's just part of the process that they had to go through.
That's very interesting. I didn't know that part of it.
Really,
I can learn a lot from you.
I try to learn as much as I can,
Absolutely.
all the time.
Do you know how many grandparents are raising children?
Way too many to count.
Really?
I think that has really affected a lot of grandparents. People that thought that they were going to enjoy their retirement are now raising a lot of children. But I think it's great for the children. It's better than being not with family.
Right. I agree. It is tiresome, though.
It is.
I mean, I have my granddaughter once in a while, and I'm tired. Or should I say that I have a new puppy, and he's really tiring me out.
And it's an emotional struggle.
Right.
It is a very emotional struggle for parents. And I think people don't understand the emotions that go into it and understand that torn relationship a parent can have when their child has an addiction and they're trying to care for their grandchild. Sometimes they don't know what's going on, and that people feel like they should know. I find that we've gotten better about not judging people, but
Oh, it's still there.
it's still there. It's still there for a lot of people. I know that people say, well, how didn't they know? What kind of family can that be because they're addicted? And there are a lot of families that are hardworking, that, excuse me, raised other children that, you know, you just don't know what child is going to be one that will face an addiction problem.
Right. We all do the best that we can, and they shouldn't be judged. Addiction has become a huge problem, and the reason for it is because of the medical field.
Yes.
Being very, very free to give medication out.
Yes, and you know, I think that's another, we never looked at it, but then I realized at one point, like, why is everybody that has an addiction problem going to get their teeth pulled? And then realized because they were getting the pain medication.
That's right.
So I was very happy years ago when they started regulating it more, because we would see it all the time. Like, they would be going doctor hopping, and they would get prescriptions, and we're like, isn't anybody talking to anybody?
I'm glad they're monitoring it.
Yes, it's about time. They should have done it a lot sooner.
Yeah. Purdue Pharmaceutical and
so many others.
others were giving it out like candy.
Right, and not caring at all what it was doing to our people.
And the thing is also, when you go to a doctor, doctors are supposed to know best. So you believe in them, and
Right.
if they give you a medication, you go, well, he wouldn't have given it to me if it was going to cause a problem.
Right. Never
Yeah.
mind about the side effects.
Right. That is life-threatening.
Right.
That's what happened to Frankie. You know, he had a motorcycle accident. It was Memorial Day weekend. His birthday is Memorial Day. So, you know, we get a phone call. Frankie had an accident. So I went out there, and He was at the Winchester Hospital, and I was stuck in traffic on the way there to find out that, oh no, he's at Mass General. So I turned around and started going to Mass General. It took so long to get there because of all the Memorial Day traffic. I was there before him. And, you know, and he was asking the nurse at the time, is this addictive? You know, and he never got an answer from that nurse. And then before you know it, I mean, he's in so much pain, he needs something, he needs medication, so that's when he started his journey on OxyContin.
And so many went down that road, from someone I know that was suffering from cancer, and they were given OxyContin for the pain.
Absolutely.
And led to an addiction.
You know, I had a guest on one night. Her name was Lily, and she was talking about all the ailments that she has, and they put her on pain medication. And she says, you know, it's really, really hard. I mean, you're in pain, but you have to try to keep your pain medication, and, you know, what does the bottle say? Take as needed?
As needed, most times.
Wow, they go through a bottle in a day. Well, it says if needed. Instead of it saying, you know, only take 4 times a day, you know what I mean, and try to deal with it.
Right.
Instead they say, oh, what's your pain level, 0 to 10? Everybody's going to say 10 so that they can have more medication in case they need it. But some are getting it because they do need it because they're addicted,
Right.
and others are just putting it aside in case I do have pain. And then they probably may never even use that script.
Right.
And I wish there would be more people like that, but
I know the first time that I was horrified, because being a social worker, you don't want your children to even have the opportunity. You pray that they don't have, and I've been lucky. And I remember when my oldest son got his wisdom teeth out, and they were quick to give him pain. I'm like, yeah, give me that. And down the drain it went. I'm like, no, I don't want this in my house. Like,
right, that was good. So you're in a good profession. You protected your children.
well,
Or
probably
you're
made
trying
it,
to.
well, yes, but because I knew how fast you can become addicted. And it just scared me. Here he was young, and this is what you're prescribing him.
And can you believe it that the reason why the doctor would give you 2 weeks supply is because the insurance companies wouldn't pay for it? If it was less, I'd say just give it to me. Give me 3 days worth, that's it.
Right. But no, they're going to give you a full bottle just in case, because the insurance will cover it.
That's right. That's right. 0 to 10. I just don't get it. I don't know.
And we're not doing enough to educate people on signs, warning signs. I feel like a lot of parents, I went to a seminar back in January, and I was lucky because I got to meet a lot of great people across the state, and a lot of parents who unfortunately lost their children. And a lot of them said that there wasn't enough education about what the warning signs are. Like, they didn't realize their spoons were missing, had no idea why they continuously were missing spoons.
I have been trying to get hidden in plain sight. And I'm going to do that as a project that Somerville Overcoming Addiction will do. And what it is it's how to learn to cope. And Learn to Cope has their literature and telling you if you see this,
Right.
you know, I mean, a knot, a plastic knot, and cut. That means that the bag's open and they, you know, or, for instance, it's right in plain sight. So, okay, your child plays stickball, right? So they have those little yellow tennis balls.
Yep.
With a knife, they could cut it, open it up, and stash their drugs. So the whole thing is they just to educate the parent, look in their room, look, you know, and this would be a mock bedroom that would show them, okay, here you go, find the drugs.
Right. Because people don't know where. I'm always amazed when it's either the state police or someone tells us where all the drugs could be hidden, and I'm like, oh, I would have never thought of that.
Yep.
And I think that would be more helpful to parents in our community, so that they know from the beginning and give themselves a fighting chance to help their children.
Right. It's not my child, but it could be.
Right.
And the thing is that all I have to say is, isn't it better to get educated on what to expect and look for than to bury your child 6 feet under?
Always. And I always say that was always my advantage, maybe my children's disadvantage with being a social worker, because I was on top of everything. I was lucky to have exposure to, from police trainings to DAs to medical professions who could always say, this is what the new thing is now. And I could always then be on top of my children to be, what are you doing? Where are you going? Who are you going out with? So
Yeah.
I think that that's always been an advantage for me.
So now they've been affected by losing a lot of their friends.
They have. My younger son especially has lost a lot of friends in the last couple of years, which I never thought I would see my child experience that at such that amount of loss in such a young age. And the amount of funerals he's gone to is just heartbreaking as a parent to see him go through that, to see any parent go through that.
No, it is tough. I know that ever since I've lost my son Frankie, I do go to wakes and visit, but the thing is that I try, well, I don't try to avoid it. It's really, really amazing. They die at a young age. It's usually one night you see the person. Then they cremate them because that's the cheapest way to help someone bury their child.
Right.
So it's just so heartbreaking, and sometimes you go in, you know, I went in one time and I couldn't believe that they didn't close the casket. So, you know, it affects me unbelievable. I mean, these kids all went to school with my son. They may have moved to Wilmington or Tewksbury or whatever, and they're not overdoses in our city, but they are our children that lived here.
Right. And that's the same that my son has gone through. They were here, but then a lot had moved.
But they had that addiction problem before they left.
Correct. And it still affects the kids that are still in the city.
Right. And then there's a lot of people that say, I made it, I survived. And then they feel badly that they're alive and their friends are dead.
Right. How come I survived?
Because you were stronger. Or maybe you were lucky you didn't get that dose of fentanyl.
Right. Or sometimes they say, how come that person's addicted and I never was? It wasn't something that I wanted to try. Because there's just no rhyme or reason who decides to try something and who ends up being addicted. And
well, you know, I noticed that Patrick went to Mackinac, and I knew that there was a lot going on in that school. And I went to the principal and I said, you know, you have a lot of drugs in your school. And you know how a parent says, not my child?
always.
Well, he said, not my school. And I said, well, I beg to differ. And I did. I took Patrick out of there and he went back to Somerville High School. So I had Frankie in Somerville High School that didn't have an issue. Because he tried, he did experiment, don't get me wrong, but he liked to drink instead.
Right.
And then after the motorcycle accident, you know, between drinking and you know, the OxyContin, he deteriorated. It was 10 years of addiction. And he just couldn't, he was so deep into it that there's just no way he could get out of it.
And I think that people don't understand how emotional it is for people.
Right. The person that has the addiction also has his own stigma,
Right.
or her stigma, about what has happened to their lives. So they don't really need anyone else. You know, so that's probably why they end up alone in their addiction. You know, had maybe That's an interesting question. How do you feel about the safe injection?
I think they definitely save lives. I think that they will save lives, and I also think we need more treatment places. I feel like we definitely need treatment that people can afford. Treatment is, and I think people don't realize how expensive treatment is for people. It's not just the long waiting lists that happen, it's the cost. And if you don't have the money or the right health insurance, you're never going to be able to get the help that you need. And I think that's sad in a state that has a lot of wealth, that we don't find more money for treatment facilities. And the sad part is, in my work, I see younger and younger teens getting addicted.
So, the other day I happened to meet Joseph Kennedy. I'm actually, been a delegate for the Democratic Party, so I went to meet him. And he talked about addiction. His family's plagued with addiction. And the one thing he did mention is that, I didn't even know the statistic. There was 90%. He asked if we knew how many people were in jail for a drug and addiction. I had no clue. So I yelled out 75%. I was wrong. 90% of the people that are in jail are in there because of drugs.
And they get no treatment. So here's one of the things that, I know Middlesex County recently started providing actual treatment and medication to help with addiction. But prior to that, the answer was never going to be, you get arrested because you have an addiction, and then you're forced into jail, and then to forced abstinence, and then time to come out, your time's all set, let's put you back on the street with no kind of follow-up. And a lot of people have a lot of overdoses after that and die because there was never any treatment and there was never any follow-up. It's, here you go, your time's all set, well, good luck. And I think that that's the part people don't always see, even with detoxes. People go into detox, but because of the lack of being able to afford follow-up treatment and the lack of space, they're back to using once they come out of detox because they have no choice.
Right.
And their risk of overdosing is so much higher.
Absolutely.
And people don't understand that.
No.
And it's
Or maybe they don't want to understand it.
a little both, I think.
Yeah.
Because I think people don't understand being in jail is not going to keep you from being...
Well, I know a lot of parents were thankful because then they didn't have to worry about where they were, where their child was.
Right.
Or when they're in detox, they're relieved.
For a couple nights of sleep.
Right.
And I have a lot of friends that are parents of kids that suffer from addiction, and they are always grateful when they're in jail because that means it's a night of sleep.
Yeah. But I always knew. Now you have that gut feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I always knew that I was going to bury Frankie.
Mm. And I think most people do. My niece passed away a few years ago from an overdose, and her daughter said she always knew that would happen.
Sorry.
And I think we don't give credit to children, and I see it a lot when I work. Like, children know. Like, as much as you don't want to tell them, they know what's going on.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're quick to tell you. And I find it, so it's hard for me when a parent passes away to then have to tell their child, because you don't want to tell them.
Right, you don't.
And but they're the ones that will tell me that they know what was going on.
Yeah. One thing is that this is not actually related to drugs, but when you talk about a child and the death of a parent, I was en route to the hospital with my niece. She was 7, and her mother had just passed away from cancer, or was about to. She was in a coma, and I had to talk to her about what was happening to her mother. You know, it was tough to have that situation, and she took it very, very well because she's a very intelligent little girl. She knew what was happening to her mother. You know, she obviously, I mean, if she's limited to what she can do, and then she's had to have a problem with her hip because it metastasized in the hip area and in the lungs and the brain, and then before you know it, you know, they see what's going on. It's hard for you not to see that they're affected by it, you know? Just like even addiction. I've been trying to get a family-oriented meeting, and I'm going to be doing that. It's Mercy Street, and I have someone that's going to start those classes. The meeting is about having a pastor or a well, it doesn't have to be a pastor. It could be anyone, a part of the religion, and also a counselor or a clinician. And they sit there with people of all different groups, whether it's someone still having an addiction, someone that's in a home, sober house, or just got out of or homeless with no place to live, and the parents and the siblings and parents that have lost their children, people in recovery. We all sit in the same room and tell your story every week. Have each one tell their story so that you feel what's going on in each person's life, you know, so the person that actually is in recovery realizes how that parent's dealing with the death of their child. And I think it's been very effective.
Oh, I'm sure, because it's always good to hear what other people's stories are.
Right.
Not just for themselves, but just so that people have a better understanding
Of the disease.
of the disease and how it affects different people.
Right. And like I said, it is a family disease. Just because there's maybe 1 or 2 people that have an addiction, everybody is affected, whether it's their children or their parents, you know, everyone. And it's hard. It's hard to recover. I mean, after losing a child to addiction, I'll never be the same. Part of my heart is gone. You know, I fought to have him because he was a 37-week baby, you know, and I was 2 weeks in the, imagine this, delivery room.
Wow.
Yeah, so I had to hear everybody that was in labor in a room with no TV or telephone and looked at the clock. It was a real tough situation, but Frankie was born. It was 7 weeks early, so that was 33 weeks. So he fought to come into this world, and he fought going out. And, you know, it's so I always talk about my happy story, which is Patrick in recovery for 8 years. I always say 6, but it wasn't 6, it's 8. I had to sit there and count. I have a problem with math. And it's always a pleasure. It's a pleasure to see him and his children and see how well he's doing now. But 39. You know, addiction stifles people for so many years to accomplish good things. And there's other people that end up feeling that they're never, ever, ever going to get out of it, so they're now suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen a lot of those.
There is definitely an increase because, and again, I think it's that desperation to get out of the situation you're in.
Right.
Because in so many, just because they can't get treatment.
Absolutely.
And it's just sad that the pain is that bad, both physically and emotionally, that then they end up taking their own lives.
And that's another thing, mental health. You know, usually when you have an addiction, sometimes it's because you have issues with who you are.
Mm-hmm.
So mentally you're not able to deal with that person, so what do? You take a substance to try to to fix it, but it doesn't get fixed.
No, and then you just get deeper and deeper.
So now they do have a lot of dual diagnosed treatment centers. Well, not a lot, but they're starting to realize that that is an issue, and that before you can take care of the addiction, you have to take care of,
the mental health.
right.
Which is another place where we just don't spend enough money taking care of people's mental health or trauma.
So what do you think that we should do here in the city? Do you think we get more involved in the schools?
I think we definitely need to start at younger ages, and I think people worry that you're teaching them something that they, at a young age, that they don't necessarily know, but they know it.
Mm-hmm.
Because kids talk. I remember the first time, my kids were in grammar school, the first time that they mentioned the word heroin to me.
Really?
Because one of the mothers had an addiction. And I wouldn't have thought my children would have known at that young age what an addiction was. But they did, because kids talk.
Absolutely. Some
So
of them know more than we do.
pretty much. But I think the younger we start, the better, to be informative and how to get help, especially with mental health. I mean, there's just so much that goes on in schools today that I would never want to be a child again. There's just the bullying that can go on, the non-acceptance, social media that can lead you down a path that you don't want to go down.
Absolutely.
And then you self-medicate, and then you're in a whole different other situation. So I think we need to start educating children at a younger age, but we also need to start educating parents at a young age.
Right. I would love to see more parent involvement when it comes to drugs.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they have to know what's going on. And the thing about not my child, please, don't believe that. Don't believe in that. You know, you have to actually see who your kids are hanging around with.
Mm-hmm. Know their parents or who their caretaker is.
But a lot of times they say, well, I don't want to go into their room. I don't want to invade in their privacy. And it's like, well, you know what? I would rather do that now.
Oh, my children know all bets are off. They're adults now. It's all bets are off. I'm still living in my house.
That's right. If you're living in my home, I need to know what's going on. But then again, I knew Frankie had an addiction problem, but what am I supposed to do? I'm not someone that says, well, I'm not saying that let's say that he was quiet when he was using in my house. I never really saw it.
Mm-hmm.
I knew he had a problem, but didn't realize it was heroin for the last 4 months of his life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so I did see bent spoons or a burnt spoon. And it's like, what's going on here? I did see the difference in behavior. I was totally mortified because Frankie always hated needles. And I remember one time he got a little BB in his ear, and I brought him to the hospital, and he wouldn't let them go near him. I had to have him go to the Mass General Hospital, then put him under anesthesia so they could just take out the BB. No one could go near him with a needle, but yet he ended up putting a needle to his arm.
And it's always amazing how that happens.
Right.
And it happens so quickly. I feel like you just spiral down that road so quickly.
Right. And I know it was bothering him because he couldn't believe himself that he was actually shooting up heroin.
And I know that we've gotten away from really talking about addictions, but we've stopped talking about HIV. And that there's like a whole group of our young people that don't understand that it's still a risk. And that it's coming back again because of the heroin addiction problem.
Right. And a lot of them use. That's why one of the good reasons of having a safe injection site, you know, believe me, in the very beginning, I was totally against it. I had phone calls from the State House asking me if I would get involved, and I said no. And then after I thought about it, I said, you know, if we had them, maybe Frankie would have gone to one of them instead of him dying alone in his room.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so wouldn't I want to have my son one more day? Of course I would. So I can't say that I'm against it now. I say, or my opinion is that if we do have a site, wouldn't there be less needles in your public parks,
Right.
right? Or around the schools?
There's lots of things to look at.
Right. And how about public bathrooms? Maybe you wouldn't have to worry every time that you went in there whether or not you were going to find a body.
Right. And that happens a lot.
I know it does.
And I think that people don't, I think people aren't aware. I'm not sure where they think where overdoses happen, but most times they are in an open public place.
Right. And if you have it in a facility, you might not have to use Narcan as much or have fatalities, because the statistics for Canada, Europe, and Australia is amazing. You know, there are hardly any deaths, and it's supervised, and, you know, Portugal is one of them. Why not here in Somerville? Why not here in Massachusetts? Why not here in this country? If you can save a life. You know, so many people have the stigma that they're not worthy to be alive. And I think it's pretty sad that when you read columns and the mean comments that are there are so heartbreaking. It is for me to read them.
I think that people who have never actually sat down and talked with someone really can never understand. And I think that the more I've been in this field, the more compassion I have and the more judgment you see.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, it could be my child. And I think people, and I wouldn't want to be talked to that way.
Right.
And how do we get people to be more compassionate? Because they didn't ask to be addicted.
Absolutely.
And it's just, we never know. Like, some people just don't understand the trauma that they faced before they had to self-medicate. And had they had the help before that, maybe they wouldn't be in the situation that they're in.
Well, one night I went to a public health meeting, and Jack Conley was there, and I think it was Mary Jo Rossetti. And I sat there with the CHA hospital team. There were, I think it was Kathy and Mary and Patrick. Well, anyway, they were all CEOs, and Mark Albanese, and they were talking about their accomplishments and how great CHA was. And then all of a sudden, Jack said to me, we have someone here that wants to, you know, that I want to have speak. And I said, you realize that I'm a parent that lost a child, and I'd like to talk to you about addiction. And I said, the one thing that you'll never see is basically someone go into a doctor and say, I'm addicted. Mm-hmm. You're going to find those people in the emergency room with symptoms of an overdose, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I see is the people that are there have no compassion for them.
Yeah.
Because there's so many people that are going to the emergency room as addicts. And one night, and I've said this a few times on the show, I have one son in Cambridge Hospital and the other son in Somerville Hospital. So I'm one mother. How do you split yourself and go and see both of them? And you can't. But the way they were treated, I just wanted to just climb over the bed and just whack them. It's an awful thing to say, and I'm sorry. But even when your child falls down and you bring them to the hospital at a young age and you see, you know, them putting a stitch in them, you feel the same way. You just want to say, don't hurt my child.
Right.
Well, emotionally, you are hurting my child.
Because I feel like there's always that look. Like, what did you do wrong?
And the thing is that I said to them what I thought would be a good idea would be have sensitivity training,
Yes.
you know, and have them and then have recovery coaches at the hospitals and the courts. And I firmly believe that we should have a drug court. What do you think?
I think we should. A lot of courts have done it, and it works. You're not going to get the treatment you need in jail.
No, definitely not.
And I know what's frustrating, I see a lot of parents that try to go to probate court to get their children sectioned in for treatment. That is the most tedious process and long and non-effective, because they sit all day in court to wait for that order that says that their child could be picked up and brought to treatment. Well, first you have to locate the child.
We had 36 hours, though.
Yep.
That's a good thing.
And then
No, it was at 72 hours.
it's 72.
Yeah.
But that's sometimes hard for people, because at that point they generally have no money, so they don't have phones that you can call them. So you're looking in every unimaginable place.
And then sometimes you do go to court, and the judge won't allow the section.
Right.
The thing is that Frankie asked me to section him. So I went down, I talked to the clinician, and we were actually on our way down there, and Frankie all of a sudden had a change of heart. But I held on to him all the way down to there, and we went to the courtroom. And he actually went away to the new facility, which at the time was the Brockton's men's facility. And they actually didn't treat him that nicely either when I went in there. But hey, you know what? It is what it is. And he felt really badly about it. I mean, he said, "Ma, I need to go in, and I need to go longer." And that was before we got the 14-day. You know, insurance companies, a lot of people don't know that they
Cut you off.
Yeah.
When your insurance run out, see you later.
But it was like 3 days.
Right. Most times,
How can
3
you-
to 5 days, mostly.
Right. And then after that, like I said, they're out on their own. But they do talk to them about what are you going to do when you get out.
Right.
But
And you don't give them any skills to be out there. You
No.
just say, here you go.
here's your paper.
Good luck.
Yeah. And I love that. It's
Call
like-
this number every day, and maybe there'll be a bed open for you.
I had one friend that was questioned about that. His name is Mike Duggan, and Mike Duggan is a social worker now, and he lives in Florida. But before this, he started the program Wicked Sober, and from Wicked Sober, he worked for was part of RCA, Recovery Centers of America. And he said the one thing that he was really amazed about when he was in detox, they said, "Well, what are you going to do when you get out of here? You know, what's your plans?" And he looked at him, "My plan got me here." So it's not going to, you know, they're at the point where they can help themselves. They need guidance. That's why I asked for a drop-in center. You know, why can't we have a center that people can come in and learn how to fill out applications for jobs, find Corey-friendly places to work, learn how to open up a checking account.
Right. We don't teach them the skills.
No.
So we say, here's your couple days of detox. Good luck with the phone numbers, but we don't give them any skills and expect them to be okay.
Right. We have to give them hope, don't we?
Yes. We need to make sure they have housing.
Mm-hmm.
We need to make sure that they have some place to go and learn some skills.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would like to see more of that.
I would too.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see more for our youth before they get to that point. I think that we don't do enough sometimes for our youth.
Do you see all those pictures in the back of us?
Mm-hmm.
I never realized that those are that's my vigil background. And all of these people lost their lives to addiction.
And also young.
Also young. Yep. Now, would you think that any one of them was addicted? You know? And you say to yourself, how can you judge people and call them names when you look at that innocence?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the number one killer to children, well, not children, but young adults from 25 to, was it 40? You know those statistics?
No, I don't know what. I know it's at 25. I'm not sure what age it ends. But there are older people. I think people misunderstand this. This is just a younger.
No. As a matter of fact, I did have someone on not too long ago that talked about addiction and the elderly.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we just talked about that a little while ago. We only have 10 more minutes left.
But there's also addiction in a lot of other fields, like the medical field.
Oh, yes.
A lot of high-stress jobs.
Judges.
Mm-hmm.
I just saw an article that a judge died of a fentanyl overdose.
Well, and fentanyl is very dangerous at this point because you never know what is, at this point, whatever's laced with fentanyl.
Right.
I thank the state police because they gave us I went to a great training one day with them, all about all different types of drugs, where it's found, fentanyl, and the dangers of fentanyl. So social workers could be exposed at any given point to fentanyl. And we've done a lot of work to tell them, like, stop touching everything, especially if there's an overdose. You don't know if it's fentanyl, you don't know if it's heroin.
Right.
You need to be careful when you're going into people's houses.
Yeah.
Because of the exposure.
But there is a high rate of elderly, and the thing is, the reason why is a lot of them are alone.
Mm-hmm.
A
lot of prescriptions for pain medicine.
Right, and they forget
what they're taking.
Right, so that they might be taking them too close together, and then before you know it, they have an addiction problem.
Right.
So they end up having more pain medication. I know that there was one elderly person. He lived in Everett, and he died at 65 years old, and he had 3 prescriptions from the Boston Medical Center, and one was for codeine, cough medicine with codeine, Suboxones, and Percocets. Why would the same doctor prescribe all 3 to a patient? So he overdosed on all of them. And he might have had them all at the same time. Who knows? So
it's unfortunate that we.
But he believed probably that he was all set because his doctor prescribed
told him took it exactly how the doctor said to take it.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. And now we also have a problem. Not only do we have people on Suboxones and Adderall together. Yes. And they say, don't mix them. Why are doctors prescribing it?
And that's where I wonder sometimes about the communication when it's not an opioid like that. There should be better communication.
Right.
In what medicines are being prescribed.
Right. So now you have your psychologist, because when they do a total health,
right,
they have you go in to see someone to talk to them, and then they see that you have depression. So now they're going to give you this kind of medication, and now you're going to, and you're having Suboxone mixed together. That you start to see personality changes. You know, I have a friend that I went and observed her daughter one day, and I said, you really should section her. You know, she was believing that there were people that were watching her, and it's like she was so irrational. And once she got off of the Adderall, she was totally normal. But she didn't believe that she had a problem. So for months, my friend was calling the doctor. But her daughter was 40 years old, and no one wants to talk to you because at 17, you don't have to have your parents' permission. Right. And then with HIPAA, you can't really discuss things.
Right. And then people don't want to believe that as you get older that they're like, no, they don't have an addiction problem, or that there's a medication problem.
But the mother knew it. And I knew it. And I'm like, my God, you're dealing with this on a daily basis? I don't know if I could deal with that. She was off the wall.
And I think that where there just needs to be more communication on what people are prescribing, because all the medications interact so differently with each other.
Right, well, she was pretty bizarre. And then when she was, off of it, it was like, my God, she could actually sit down and socialize and interact with you. But before then, she was spending all her time in her room or wandering and thinking that, very delusional, so thank God that was a very, very short stint. I'm glad that she finally realized that there was a problem and listened to her mother, because she thought her mother didn't want, you know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes the relationship from parents and children.
And different.
Yeah. We're almost done. Is there anything that you would like to add to what we spoke about?
I would like to add that sometimes we need to remember the children in all of this, like the little children and babies that are involved in this. And I think sometimes we forget that people that have an addiction are somebody's parent, somebody's child, somebody's sibling, somebody's niece or nephew. And we forget that sometimes. And I think that a lot of times we forget that there's a lot of children that are going without their parents.
And do you know this next generation of kids are not going to know what it's like to have a grandparent. Right? So where is that family connection? We're destroying it by allowing this to continue.
And not addressing it.
Yeah, it's really tough. I'm telling you, there's 23 million people in recovery. There's 22 that are still using. And we lose 154 a day now in this country? That's quite a bit.
Quite a bit.
And then I'm going to give you this beautiful shirt that I had made up. And there's our logo, and it says 64 lost in Somerville since 2000. Now, 164. Now I had to cross that out because I think it's up to 168.
That's really sad.
It is pretty sad. They may not have died here in Somerville, but there were Somerville children that left the city and had an addiction and then died elsewhere. So, and there were a few that actually died in the city. So I want to give this to you as a present. And it's nice to be able to talk to you about addiction. I've learned something from you, and I wanted to hear the social workers, opinion, knowledge of what's going on behind closed doors. I'm glad that you're so compassionate about the people that you care about, your family and the people that you work with. You take it home with you, don't you?
I do. So one of my side things that no one really knows I do, so I pair with a woman to make, she does most of the sewing. I do a lot of the help with the financing. She does all the sewing. We make blankets. She makes the blankets for trauma children, and then I had asked her to make me a slew of blankets for babies, substance-exposed newborns, so that they had something that their parents, or if they were still in the hospital, if they had something that they could snuggle with.
Well, that sounds
comfort.
wonderful.
So
I want to thank you again.
Thank you for
and I think that
inviting me.
we are actually on Facebook.
Oh.
I do ask him to do that, and hopefully he had done that. If not, I'm going to shoot him. No, actually, come tomorrow. David Ortega, who is a program, he will put it online so you can see it if you go into www.somervillemedia.org, and it'll say recent shows, and you'll be able to see this one.
Thank you.
And I know I've been here on a Saturday morning and saw myself as I was walking by. So
I saw myself
think it's
earlier when I was coming in.
Oh yeah, that's right. You and yes, you did. And I was watching you. you know, it's totally amazing. People, please donate to somervillemedia.org, because you know what? We need more communication, and that's what I feel about this city, is that
Yes.
we need to get the word out, whether it is with messaging or links to different things so that you can learn exactly everything that's here in the city. If you actually go to 311, you'll find that they don't have that much information about drugs. Call.
We need a lot more information about drugs so that we're all educated.